So whether you're a creator wondering about your AI influence or an engineer interested in this technical challenge, there's something here to experiment with. For creators, no, you won't immediately get paid for AI using your work, but you will have a way of understanding how it does, and you will be able to share something and maybe show the value that you bring to these companies. For engineers, yes, we know about the limitations of attention-based attribution and attribution in general. Make something better, because we could do things here that could really help, not only help creators, compensate them, but also find some of those edge cases that make the amazing stuff, because the amazing stuff doesn't come from the middle soup that generative AI will create. We don't need better copyright laws. We need a new system that turns creators from adversaries into stakeholders. Not questioning whether AI will use your work, it's whether you'll shape how this happens. We need to align incentives between a creator economy and the AI large language models and anyone using content. Not just to give them credit everywhere, that's pretty much impossible, but to use some form of attribution and recognition to do more than just sort of say, we're scraping it, it's all fair use, and thanks for creating it. Copyright law for AI looks like a castle built to protect books. Stone walls, drawbridges, guards at every gate. For centuries, it worked beautifully. Then AI showed up, not with battering rams, but with wings. And suddenly, our castle walls became sort of irrelevant. Copyright law is dying. I would argue with the digital world and AI, it's probably dead. Not because it's wrong, but because it can't keep up. With tech giants battling in courtrooms, smaller creators outside of the big media companies are left behind. But what if we stop fighting yesterday's war and build something better? Moving from protection of someone's creative work to participation. Because in episode 70, when copyright died, the day AI changed creation forever, we're going to look at why that sue and hope model isn't working and propose 2 new models to create and earn, and why traditional copyright fails in an AI world. So follow through, because at the end, we're going to share specific ways and some code if you want to jump into it to try to prove and at least validate your creation a little bit and start rethinking this whole copyright AI content thing from being an opposing battle where the large language models say we can't pay for it and the people who are creating it are saying, what's up with us? Where do we go next? So last month at TechCrunch Disrupt, I watched a really fascinating scene unfold. Martin Casado of A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, was explaining AI regulation in a great session. When I asked him about the elephant in the room, why do tech companies keep treating AI training like a copyright-free zone? I asked for his thoughts around why does a large language model take content and when it ingests it, there's no copyright involved. It's just broken into tokens and can never really easily be created on the other end. And he said, what I'm suggesting with the copyright is sort of like his daughter who went to see, let's say, a great Spider-Man movie. So she comes home and she's drawing a Spider-Man, right? Same thing. Now, I didn't want to call him out because this is TechCrunch and he gave a great session, but looking at this, it's really not the same thing. Because what we're asking is, well, that's sort of random. That can be done millions of times a second. That can be done so many, maybe not millions of, well, it's random. That can be done millions of times in a month, unlike his daughter. And how weird would it be if we were to go out and take all these amazing young teenage creative works, put them in a large language model that we made money off of, and didn't think not just to credit them, but to align incentives, to think about how we could create this to feed the data we need and the creativity to fuel it, instead of just sort of backing into courts of law. And it comes to the breaking point, because right now there's these 2 truths coming together. Engineers say input into a large language model, anything they take off the internet, a website, social media post, etc., is not copyrightable. And if you look at copyright law, which was written back for when we all bought books, right? And when I would take this book, if I took it, I had to put it in this format to be able to sell it to somebody else. That's why the protection of a copyright is an old model that really isn't going to be able to handle things. We can't sue our way out of this. We're at a point where the old rules don't apply, and we need to move from protection to participation to move beyond sue and hope. For example, it just came out recently that OpenAI won an early dismissal of a case by Ross Story and Alternet, who said that they took their information, scraped it, and that there were, in sort of metadata, there were copyright trademarks on this content. So OpenAI came in, scraped it, and of course turned it into tokens, and all that copyright information was lost because, to OpenAI's credit, they said, well, we're never putting it back together again. The whole point is we can bring it in, but if we don't output exactly the same thing, the law can't really see what the difference is and then what the damage is to the person who had it, quote unquote, stolen. So in this case, the judge said the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998, which was used to say OpenAI violated that act because that act says you can't separate the copyright from the original work. But the judge looked at this and said, well, I can see it in the input, but there's nothing going on here because the input doesn't actually create a product. It just creates tokens that then connect in sort of a probability-based way. Essentially a word calculator to put out answers, but it's not designed to put out the same answer. So this dismissal, which was without prejudice, meaning it could come back up, is really indicative of how copyright law looks at this and says there's nothing wrong with what's going on. And this is what the large big tech companies are banking on. And honestly, after looking into this, may be true. So the new model, create and earn. Why traditional copyright fails in an AI world. Now, there was another case on back in September 5th. The judge ruled that AI artwork can't be copyrighted. Another angle that they're going at it is not using old copyright law, but Stephen Thaler has been creating an AI for many, many years, and he sued Shira Perlmutter, the Register of Copyrights, after the Copyright Office refused to register the copyright for a purely AI-generated work he had submitted. He created the intelligent engine, AI sentient being, in his words, will eventually becoming that. He's created that for many years in artificial intelligence. So it created a work. Why can't he copyright it? Why? Because copyright law is for humans who create things in physical products. There is no way that he's going to be granted this, because then they would have to grant a copyright to something created not by a human being. That's probably coming, but you can see the world of AI and copyright is messed up because we're trying to run things by the old rules, the old ways. If you're looking at Stephen Thaler and Perlmutter, they're both right and they're both wrong. If you're looking at OpenAI and Ross Story and Alternet, they're both right and they're both wrong. And that's our problem. This trying to apply law and sue our way out of it and hope in 5 years will come out. There have been significant settlements people have done in major businesses to be able to go by the scraping and basically get a licensing fee. Reuters is involved in one. Adobe's been involved in a few. There's others that are sort of happening under the radar. And the stakes here, the stakes are really high. This isn't about stopping AI. It's about something way bigger. Not protection, but performance. How does that content do? Most content does not generate performance, does not generate people listening to it. How this content actually influences whole vectors, not just the token, but the vectors to create influence. Now we might not only be able to reward it, this kind of performance-based enhancement is an analytics dream, but it also goes back to finding those people who are generating enough volume to be rewarded, either with grants, payments, even credits for using the tools. There's so many ways this could be turned into a positive besides paying lawyers. It's not about barriers, but creating bridges. Not about copyright, but how do we collaborate with AI? And how do we respect the creators and encourage them and give them incentive to keep creating? Because the really good stuff, we still create. And if we're just waiting for AI to do it, what's it freeing up our time for? So we're going to explore two scenarios that could transform how creators and AI work together, not through courts, but actually through code. Imagine AI training is sort of like music remixing. Each piece of content becomes tokens, building blocks that carry value. So you might take a riff from here or there. There might be a song that influences the entire mix that you do. So we do influence tracking. So AI measures your content and shapes the outputs. More influence equals higher earnings with real-time impact measurement. It's what we're talking about is determining the value rather than saying, hey, we scraped it and it's over. What about those small percentages that give value? Couldn't they be compensated? Couldn't they be recognized as adding value to the intelligence of the training? So let's break this down into practical terms. Training AI models is expensive, costing less and less each year, but still super expensive. And most creators earn pennies per use of their content. And licensing deals for the big players can range from 2 to 5 million, hundreds of millions. It so depends on how big the operation is. And a lot of this isn't shared publicly. So if AI companies were even to pay for every piece of content, the business model really doesn't seem like it would be valid. And the amount of pushback we're seeing from everybody in the industry shows that it's not a bluff. They need that content. But the funny part is then it says, well, we're not going to pay anything. And then that doesn't give any incentive. And there's been a lot of cutoff of really good content lately, obviously from things like the New York Times, those in lawsuits. But you're also seeing other people sort of limit the access to their content who are creating it. And this limits the intelligence to where so much is AI generated and so much is very copycat even without that, that you might be incentivizing a sort of run towards training that gets really mediocre because the content stays their way. And high impact content should be given higher compensation. So we're going to talk about that in the next step, how we actually track that. What high impact means. Generic content, let's say like basic product descriptions, minimal compensation, if any, maybe credits. Maybe you get ChatGPT for $18 instead of $20 a month. Maybe you're used as part of a lab to put your creativity in without actually having to pay as much. There are ways that this can really create not only a swelling of a community, but also better input into what's being created. Now, unique creative works like distinctive art styles, like the type that they in the style of would search for, would get a mid-tier compensation. And that compensation could come in credits, that compensation could come in grants, that compensation could give back to artists, to the arts, to music. You could really turn this into something very positive. High impact content are like widely cited research papers. And a working model would look like take a base rate of training costs allocated to creator compensation, a little like 0.1%. Use content influence, we'll talk a little bit how we measure that as a multiplier, track through the model outputs. Because if you can actually see that this input is impacting this output repeatedly, you're probably not only seeing a trend, you're seeing something worthy not only of payment, but of recognition, of giving them an incentive for succeeding that helps you as a large language model succeed, helps them as the creator get compensated if it connects with people at a level that it really starts spreading. Because can you imagine how that influence would influence the outcome, biases, all the things that come out? This ties into such a deep understanding of what the output is, I think. A bonus pool for content that significantly improves model performance. So the real solution is not a fixed percentage. It's a sliding scale where compensation increases with proven value. The way creators get paid more when they generally improve AI systems, and companies only pay premium rates for content that delivers results. And we're going to talk about how to do that next. Simulation 2, digital influence rights. This one wants to replace copyrights with influence rights. The more your work shapes AI outputs, the more control and compensation you receive. Now, that is very different from the old copyright, and it's actually based on the output of influence. So here are the core mechanics. There's value tiers. High content creates premium rights. Cultural significance affects earnings. Dynamic pricing based on use, and also based on use within the large language model. So you create a creator benefits program. You earn AI system credits, again, discounts, ways to use the tool for graphics, ways to actually make this creativity part of your growth as an AI model, premium access rights and influence over future AI training that they're doing. And it really opens access to small creators gaining a little collective power, impact-based earnings, and no lawyers needed. So if you walked into an art gallery filled with art on the wall, one looked a little bit like a Van Gogh in the corner. Another might look like a Rothko. Those are two different paintings if you know them. And so you're looking over it, but one has a style. How do we prove it though? More importantly, how do we credit and maybe even compensate these influences? Remember that idea of mixing music. How can we actually use this to sample? Because this is sort of what's going on. So we're going to talk about AI attribution possibilities. And yes, you can try this yourself. I've got code and a much more detailed process I got from Claude. And I'd love to be not only refuted, but show me the right way to be able to provide attribution, to be able to see some signals, understanding this is imperfect. There's no way it can track everything, and anything with attribution knows the input, knows the output, but the middle is sort of vague. Tracking creative influence in AI is like trying to find a specific drop of water after it's been poured into the ocean. We don't need perfect attribution. Hey, Netflix doesn't know exactly why you watch that show, but they can make pretty good guesses. Spotify doesn't perfectly understand music, but they can track influences. What if we could do the same with generative AI? We built a proof of concept system that does something pretty fascinating with Claude. It watches how AI models pay attention when they create. Think of it like a heart rate monitor for creativity. Every time the AI focuses on certain parts of its training, and we spot patterns. Now, for the technical folks, we're tracking attention patterns across neural networks, looking for distinctive signatures in how content influences outputs. Not perfect, but it is measurable. This is certainly not a new idea. Stability AI is making creator compensation models. Adobe Content Credentials system tracks image origins. CredTent is a new one that empowers creators to control how LLMs use their content and enables AI tools to source licensed credible work for model training. This is happening. The goal isn't to build a perfect attribution system, it's to create enough of a signal to build new markets around creative influence. We're not claiming to solve AI attribution, but we're starting a conversation of how it might work and how copyright might work for all of us. So what I did was I took the code that Claude created for me, and then it said, would you like me to analyze a piece of your original content? This is what we created. So even the basic analysis will show how much content influences the derived work, which key concepts carried through, and how structure was preserved or adapted. And so it ran an analysis, and the analysis summary says it's a high concept presentation. The core ideas are brought down, question frameworks and partner engagement remained intact. So what it did is took my long thing and made it like a really short, bulleted, shorter sort of presentation. Key transformations, bullets turned into hierarchical sections, original concepts expanded with more context. This is all through the code. We now analyzed my text in Claude and Claude's improvements to it, maintaining core question framework while enhancing the structure. So it shows that the core material was obviously a big influence and were created. That was the purpose of it. But the whole point is, can we track creative influence? Can we measure content value, understand transformation patterns, and identify unique contributions? Because this shows how attribution could work in practice, showing not just what content influenced the output, but how it was transformed and expanded. So let me show you some of this. The key findings were the information density between the original and the output was increased by 28%. Framework clarity improved by 2.1. Added 3 new structured sections: core strategy, question framework, success indicators. Okay, this is what it created, not what was brought to it. Unique contributions: the success metrics framework, hierarchical organization, a clear progression flow, and actionable outcomes for each section. So I asked it to create some content visualizations. And if you're looking, you can see the content value metrics comparison. This was created with a Claude prompt, showing how the enhanced content and source content have data, information, and influence associated with them that can be attributed back to my original content that was ingested. So whether you're a creator wondering about your AI influence or an engineer interested in this technical challenge, there's something here to experiment with. For creators, no, you won't immediately get paid for AI using your work, but you will have a way of understanding how it does, and you will be able to share something and maybe show the value that you bring to these companies. For engineers, yes, we know about the limitations of attention-based attribution and attribution in general. Make something better, because we could do things here that could really help, not only help creators, compensate them, but also find some of those edge cases that make the amazing stuff, because the amazing stuff doesn't come from the middle soup that generative AI will create. We don't need better copyright laws. We need a new system that turns creators from adversaries into stakeholders. Not questioning whether AI will use your work, it's whether you'll shape how this happens. We need to align incentives between a creator economy and the AI large language models and anyone using content. Not just to give them credit everywhere, that's pretty much impossible, but to use some form of attribution and recognition to do more than just sort of say, we're scraping it, it's all fair use, and thanks for creating it. Usage influence tracking. AI systems quantify how much a creator's input affects specific outputs. Higher influence might lead to higher credits, creating a relevance-based compensation, and only for the top performing ones. Revenue sharing via influence metrics. Instead of random licensing fees, large language models adopt a system where they pay high influence creators or give cumulative credit based on content impact and participation. This could be so easy. Technical tracking solutions embedding subtle, invisible markers within tokens might ensure attribution and track derivative influence without hindering the learning process. Reframing tokenized content as transformative sets the foundation for a fairer system. It doesn't say now your work doesn't exist. And that's the legal argument based on the old model that nobody can afford or wants to follow. This isn't about lawsuits. It's a tech-enabled system where content usage aligns with incentives for creators. Think of this as intellectual currency. Creators don't lose control over the content, but gain influence over its use. So you could do value-based tiers, incentive mechanics. Not all content has the same impact. A character that just breaks through requires higher credits than some niche blog post. Set value tiers. Content with high cultural or educational impact earns higher credits or rights to compensation, if that makes sense. These different categories are going to really make some economical and some more credit-based, more like building ambassadors rather than building people who resent you for creating content and you taking it. An AI-backed loyalty program. Creators earn credits or rights to discounted AI access based on their impact, non-monetary rewards for contributions that might otherwise not go recognized. Level the playing field for smaller creators. By incentivizing creator participation, we build a fairer, more sustainable system where copyright litigation, which is a losing effort, and come on, you have to have a lot of lawyers and a lot of money to even back creators. Token-based compensation tracks real impact, even just for recognition. Influence rights reward ongoing contribution, and small creators gain power through this impact through building better AI.